Well now, are you settled? Welcome back to Celticism, your place to come to for ghost stories told in the dark. I'll just sit here beside you while the house settles too. It's that strange stretch between St. Stephen's Day and the turning of the year, when the fire burns low, the clocks seem to stall, and the nights feel like they're holding their breath. Now, let's do our little trick. And don't close your eyes just yet. Let them soften. Just peer through your eyelashes. Watch the room twist a little, the shapes move and change. Breathe slow, and let the warmth of the bed pull you deeper with every exhale. Loosen that jaw, those shoulders, those hands. Let everything sink down, heavy and still. And if you catch the smell of something spoiled, don't worry. It's only the body in your cupboard reminding you it's there. If you hear whispers from the next room, pay them no mind. They only talk when they think you're asleep. When morning comes, drop a comment. Maybe tell me where you're listening from, like, subscribe, and tell a friend who loves a ghost story before sleep. This is the place you come back to every night, to rest and to drift. For now, let's begin. Glenamaddy, County Galway, the dead week between St. Stephen's Day and New Year's Eve, late 1800s. The toll house sat low and crooked at the bend in the road, its little window glazed with frost. A man in a black coat came along the lane at a steady clip, reins loose in one hand, the other holding a crumpled handkerchief. His horse was a good brown gelding, clean and sure-footed. The man's eyes were red. He looked like grief itself. The tall man stepped out with his ledger. "Fee for the horse and cart," he said. The man pressed the handkerchief to his mouth. "Sir, forgive me. I'm after coming from my mother's wake in Roscommon. Only an hour since we put her in the ground. God rest her." He lowered his voice. "I've the coins, but I'm late for the registry in Tuam. If I miss the clerk, I'll be fined twice. Would you stamp me paper and I'll square the toll on my return? I'd be in your debt." The toll man looked at the horse, then at the man's black coat. "You've a receipt?" "I do," he offered, a folded slip damp from his palm. "The clerk knows me. Hession's the name, Willie Hession." The toll man read the slip. It looked official enough to a busy man, half frozen on a winter morning. He hesitated. The stranger's eyes shone. "God comfort you," the toll man said at last. He stamped the slip. "Go on with you, so. No man'll stop a son on a day like that." "Oh, bless you," the man said, and he crossed himself. "She'll pray for you in heaven." He clicked his tongue, and the gelding moved off. He waited until the toll house was a bend behind him. Then he laughed under his breath. He tucked the stamped slip into his coat and loosened the buttons to let the cold bite his chest and sharpen the joy of it. And that was Willie Hession for you, a neat trick, a clean face, and a story ready for every door. He wasn't wicked, he'd say only clever. If the world was a fair game, he'd play fair, but the world wasn't, so why should he? He whistled a bar from a hymn as the horse's shoes rang soft on the frozen road. The fields lay white and bare. Reeds still hung on cottage doors, bowknots gone stiff with frost. Smoke lifted from a chimney here and there, church bells far off in the morning damp. 1, 2, then quiet again. Between Christmas and the New Year, the country felt hollow, as if the world were holding its breath. Willie rolled his shoulders. On to the next county, he said to the gelding. On to the next man with a stamp and a soft heart. He reached a bigger village by noon and tied the cart outside the public house. The sign above the door creaked. A handful of men stood inside, hats low, hands cupped round mugs. The air smelled of turf. Willie ordered a drop, and when the publican turned to draw it, set his hat on the counter with the crown up. I'm bound to knock on doors for the widow Kane, he said to nobody in particular, just loud enough to be heard. God help her, 4 children, and no coal since Advent. Father Murphy asked me to carry a purse for her. It's not much, but sure, a penny from every man, and we'd see her through to the end of the year. The men looked at him. He kept his eyes kind, his shoulders small. Who's the widow? Asked one. Stone Cottage, past the well, Willie said. Her man died at the fair, fell under a cart. He sighed. It's a hard world, lads. The hat filled, pennies, a few halfpennies, even a shilling from the publican. Willie nodded thanks and spoke blessings and made a show of counting nothing at all. He tucked the coins into a little purse and left a few coppers in the hat for appearance. Outside, in the lane, he slipped the purse into his inner coat pocket, the one with the button. He would give the widow the coppers and keep the gold. Nobody would be the wiser. A man like Willie never stayed long. Anywhere he moved, county to county, by the time a face fixed to a name in one parish, he'd be 10 parishes away and clean as a whistle. You could call it cowardly. He'd call it sensible. He climbed to the cart, and the gelding leaned into the traces. The road out of the village bent between thorn hedges rimed in white. Willie Hession's smile lingered in the cold air a long time after he left it behind. The winter day burned low. The light went the colour of pewter, then lead. The hedges grew black, the road narrowed. A rook flapped up from the ditch with a cranky cry and settled again. Country, quiet, the kind that hums in your head. It was only then that Willie noticed the horseman. At first, a shape on the crest of a far field. He thought it was a stone post until it moved a little, horse and rider, both black against the last smear of light. It watched him. Then the path dipped, and the rider was gone. Willie clicked to the gelding and told himself he hadn't seen anything at all. Still, he didn't whistle for a while. He reached the next stop after dark, just a hamlet really, a church, a forge, 3 cottages huddled close at a yard where men gathered to talk and smoke. The forge threw a red glow across the mud. Willie pulled a wrapped bundle from the cart and carried it into the light. He set it on a barrel and unrolled it, slow, a little wooden box, velvet inside, and on the velvet a long, white bone. Gentlemen, he said softly, I've come by a holy relic, a bone of a saint. Father Murphy sent me to carry it on old roads so the parish might be blessed. Is that a shin bone? One man asked, suspicious. Saint's bone, Willie said with a smile, and I won't say whose, only that it's been known to cure the croup and keep the potato blight from a field for a full turn of the year. He let them peer, he let them whisper, he let them doubt, he let them want. Then he said what they expected him to say. Give what you can for the church roof, lads. I'll leave the blessing here tonight, and I'll take it on to Dunmore in the morning. Coins clinked, hands crossed themselves. He closed the box with a respectful nod, tied it with a ribbon, and carried it out. In the lane, out of sight, he slipped the bone back into a sack with 4 more just like it, the shank bones of a pig from a butcher in Tuam, boiled clean for purpose. He tucked the real take, the coins, into the inner pocket. He could feel the little purse of the widow's money beside it. A clever man made the small things add up. A clever man never went hungry. He clicked his tongue, the gelding started, the road stretched black as a cave, the frost whispering under the wheels. He heard the rider long before he saw him. Not sound, absence of sound. His own horse's rhythm seemed to falter. The night thinned. Willie turned to look over his shoulder. There, at the far end of the lane, was the horseman again. Closer now, coat long, hat wide-brimmed, the crown pulled low, collar up to the ears. He sat tall, unmoving, as if carved. The horse beneath him was proud and big and strange in a way Willie couldn't name. A pale breath drifted from under the brim, little white puffs in the cold. Willie blinked, and the lane bent, and the rider was lost behind a hedgerow. He faced forward again and made a joke to the gelding, and his laugh came out thin. Next parish, next trick. He reached a crossroads with a toll booth and a posting yard. The landlord's man was supposed to collect rent arrears there tomorrow. Willie arrived tonight. He took a clean sheet of paper and wrote in a steady hand he'd learned in a school he'd never paid for. By order of the office, arrears for December are to be paid this night to the bearer W. Hessian, duly appointed, receipts to follow. He folded it, smudged it a little, and went door to door with a ring on his knuckles that sounded like iron on oak. Not many doors, only enough to make the purse fat. In each kitchen he stood just so, hat in hand, eyes down, voice low. He spoke like a clerk without being a clerk, firm, polite, unavoidable. Coins changed hands. Men cursed the landlord into their collars and paid anyway. Women watched him from behind their shawls. By the time Willie reached the last cottage, the purse was heavy. He tucked it under his coat and smiled up at the clean, cold sky. He had a good feeling in his blood again, the easy heat of a night well done. He rode on, counting by touch and not by sight. He felt it before he heard it, the weight of someone behind him. He turned. The horseman stood in the lane not 50 yards away. He'd come closer now without a sound, hat brim low, collar high, no lantern, no flicker, just the curl of white breath under the brim and the slow rise and fall of the horse's chest, steam slipping from its nostrils. For a second the rider lifted his chin, and Willie saw 2 faint pinpricks of light under the shadow, like a cat's eyes catching candle. Willie faced forward. He touched his heels to the gelding's sides. "One bite," he said softly. "One now." The gelding trotted. Willie risked a glance back. The rider hadn't moved. Willie let out a breath he hadn't known he was keeping. He took a bend. Then, just to know he could, he snapped the reins and set the gelding to a gallop, head low, wheels rattling, frost spraying from the cart's rims. He ran the horse until the lane opened to a long, straight stretch. When his lungs burned and the gelding's ribs heaved, he slowed to a gentle walk and looked back. The rider was there again, 100 feet behind, trotting, unhurried, same distance, same pace, as if space itself were a trick it didn't have to honor. Willie's mouth went dry. He swallowed. He didn't joke with the horse this time. From then on, the night tightened around him. Where there were two ways to turn, the lane he took grew poorer. Where the hedges thinned, the ditch deepened. Where the stars showed, a cloud drifted over them and they went out. Willie chewed his lip until he tasted blood. He passed a cottage. A man came out with a lantern to turn the dog and saw the cart and the rider and crossed himself twice. Willie called, "Friend, have you a spare stall for a horse?" But the man shut his door in a hurry and slid the bolt. The lantern's light threw a line across the lane, then died. Willie kept on. The road dipped through a low boggy stretch. Water showed black under a rind of ice. The gelding's breath came hard, white, in bursts. The cart creaked. The leather tug straps sang a little with each pull. Behind him, the rider kept a steady trot, never closing, never falling back. Willie tried the thing men try when they're afraid. He talked. "All right," he said to the dark. "Whatever you are, be off with you. I have friends in Roscommon, I'll have you know. Hard men with iron bars. I have a cousin in the guards. I can name him." The dark didn't answer. The dark never cared for names. The lane rose again and ran along a low ridge. A clump of firs stood black against the sky. Willie thought to turn into them and hide. He set the gelding's nose into the trees. The branches closed like teeth and scraped his cheeks. He held the gelding still under the boughs and counted to 50, then to 100. He heard nothing. He slid from the cart to look back down the lane between the trunks. The rider stood not in the lane but in the trees with him, 50 yards away. Horse and man both turned his way, breath showing in white puffs. No sound, no misstep, just there. Willie stumbled back into the cart and drove the horse out through the needles in a spray of frost. The gelding snorted and threw its head and went into a lurching run down the ridge to the road again. He didn't look back for a long time. At last the cart rattled to a stop of its own accord. The gelding had run until its legs shook. Willie sat braced with both hands on the plank seat, chest heaving. He fumbled at his coat to check the purse, to count by touch the sweet heavy shuffle of coins, the only thing in the world that ever fixed him to himself. His fingers closed on nothing. The inner pocket gaped. The little button had torn away. The purse was gone. He made a sound that wasn't a word. He clambered down. He walked back along the lane, bent low, scanning the frost. There in the road was the pouch, spilled open. Coins shone dull in the lamp glow from the cart. Shillings, pennies, a few sovereigns, all scattered like seed half sunk in rime. He crouched and began to gather them. His hands shook. He dropped more than he kept. He scraped the ice with his fingernails and cursed the world and the maker of it. He didn't hear the rider come into the lane. There was no sound to hear. He looked up and saw hooves in front of his face. They were big and dark and wet with melt. Steam curled from them. The legs above were good horse legs, and they were wrong, as if skin had torn off in places and bone shone through slick as a blade. The chest above worked slow and heavy, and the breath that drifted down over Willie's cheeks smelled of cold iron. The man in the saddle tipped his head. Under the hat brim, two small lights winked and went out. And when the rider spoke, the voice was mild, a countryman's voice, close and low. "Ve tu sever galore," he said. "You were rich enough." The horse lowered its head until its hot breath met Willie's. Its lips peeled back to show teeth, thin as needles, wet with drool. The steam of it mingled with Willie's own breath. The coins clicked between his shaking fingers. He closed his eyes. Black. A year later, the frost came early again. At the corner by the chapel in Glenamaddy, a bearded man sat with his back to the wall and his eyes fixed on nothing. A cap lay in the mud before him. Now and then a passer-by dropped a coin into it and moved on quickly without looking. His coat hung crooked. One sleeve was empty and folded and stitched where the arm ended at the elbow. That stump lay tucked under the other hand. Nobody spoke to him. Some said the man used to have a fine horse and a good coat. Some said he used to have a way with words. A few said they knew his name once and had given it up. He didn't ask for money out loud. He didn't speak at all, really. But people who put a coin in the cap sometimes turned their heads after, as if they'd heard a horse's breath right behind them, a quick, quiet puff in the air. Each morning, a small nun in a worn habit passed him by the chapel gate. She never asked him his name, only pressed a coin into his cap and whispered a prayer he couldn't remember. Some in the parish said she'd lately taken to keeping a small notebook for her thoughts, a way, perhaps, to quieten her mind. I kept that little notebook with me on the Tuam Road this morning. The man with the empty sleeve was at the chapel gate again, and I left a coin in his cap before the fog came in. Since the trouble at the convent, the Mother Superior has encouraged me to keep a journal along with my prayers. She said it may ease my mind. I hope she's right. They say my place is St. Dempsey's when rooms feel heavy, so I went. I was sent to St. Dempsey's Penitentiary 3 winters ago, though I never asked for it. The Mother Superior said they wanted me because of my gift. She used the word softly, as if it embarrassed her. They heard about a thing that happened a few years ago when I prayed over a drowned boy who'd been pulled from the lake. He'd been dead nearly an hour. When I touched his forehead and said the rosary, he gasped and breathed again. I don't remember saying the words. They said my eyes rolled back, that I spoke in Latin I didn't know. And since then, I've been the sister who sees, the one you send when a place feels heavy. I never believed it was sight. It was only a feeling, like a pressure behind the eyes, and I hated it. The penitentiary sat miles past the town, half buried in fog and sea wind. The driver who brought me wouldn't pass the gate. Said the horse wouldn't go nearer, and I can't blame him. Even from the cart you could feel it, a silence that had weight. Inside, the smell was enough to turn your stomach. Damp lime, sickness, the ghost of old smoke. The nurse who met me looked like he had long stopped sleeping. He walked fast, and I had to half run to keep up, my rosary clattering against my belt. They took me to the superintendent, a large man with red veins around his eyes. He looked at me as though I were something between a blessing and a bother. He said there was a cell no one could clean. Orderlies swore they heard weeping and something small dragging along the floor. If you can say a prayer there, he told me, and prove there's nothing to it, I'll sleep easier, and so I went. The corridors wound like intestines, no windows, only lamps throwing dull orange circles. The doors had iron latches, some open, some closed. From inside came whispering, crying, muttering prayers with no shape. I kept my head down and followed the nurses back. The cell was small enough to touch both walls if I stretched my arms. The bed frame was bare iron, the bucket half full of black water. The air had the taste of metal. I stood a long time, listening. I said the rosary. Nothing. No cold breath, no whisper, no presence. Just a silence so thick it pressed on my eardrums. When I came out, the nurse was already halfway down the corridor. Someone had started screaming elsewhere. He turned, shouted that I should find my own way back. 2 lefts, an iron door straight on. Then he vanished into the noise. I walked. The fog had crept indoors. It hugged the floor like milk boiling over. I turned left, then left again, but the halls bent in strange ways. Every step echoed like something was following a half beat behind. I found a door and thought it might be the exit. It wasn't. It was a long, low room filled with inmates, men and women together, scattered in chairs, rocking, humming, whispering to people who weren't there. A few stood and swayed as if in prayer. No one noticed me coming in. And then I felt that pressure behind my eyes, that old, dreadful stirring, and the air seemed to clear of one veil and show another underneath. And then I saw them. They clung to the inmates like children clinging to their mothers, small, pink, round things, half cherub, half leech. Their skin was pale as wax. Their faces looked old and twisted, like spoiled fruit. Their smiles were wide and patient. One perched on a man's shoulder, whispering into his ear. Another lay across a woman's lap, kicking its heels, biting gently at her wrist. They weren't violent, not then. They just held on, always touching flesh, always smiling. I understood then what the nurse had meant when he said some of them never stopped laughing at night. These weren't angels, though they looked like someone's memory of one. They were the weight that drags the soul down, personal demons, I suppose, the real reason half these poor souls never got better. They didn't look at each other, they looked at me. Every one of them. I kept walking, steady, careful, pretending I saw nothing. The people muttered their half-prayers and the creatures grinned through them. The smell of damp skin and candle smoke made me gag. A man near the fire began to cry without sound, his body shaking. The small thing on his back grinned wider, its tiny fingers gripping his neck. Another woman began humming a lullaby, and the one on her knee mouthed the same words, perfectly in time. I found a door at the end of the room, locked. I turned back, another door half open, the lavatory, I think. I slipped in, needing air, needed to wash my face and convince myself it was only fatigue. The water ran brown, then cleared. I splashed it over my cheeks. The mirror above the sink was cloudy, cracked at one corner. And then I saw it. Not behind me, on me, something small and pale crawling over my shoulder in the glass. A hand first, the size of an infant's, then a full arm, pulling its little weight up my back. Its bald head rose beside my own, eyes like 2 beads of old cream, mouth stretched in that same slow smile. I turned. Nothing. Just the sink and the fog curling around my boots. In the mirror, it was still there, clinging to me like it had always been there. And that's where my memory stops. Within the month I left St. Dempsey's behind and travelled west to the Lake Country for rest, to write, to pray, and to heal in my own silence. Most evenings I'd walk the ridge above Lough Gill, watching the fishermen and families below. For a time, the simple rhythm of their day felt like grace. Along the shores of Lough Gill, life went quietly that winter. From the ridges above, a traveller might see a father and son mending their nets beside the water, unaware they were being watched from afar. The boy's name was Pascal Plunket. That winter, when the frost lay across Lough Gill like glass, that boy, Pascal Plunket, spent his days helping his father mend nets and check traps along the shore. One morning, as the sun broke faint and pale over the hills, Pascal heard a soft, crying sound near the reeds. He followed it, expecting a wounded bird, but what he found was something else entirely. A small creature lay half in the water, half on the stones. Its body was shaped like an otter's, but longer. The fur was dark and sleek with a faint shimmer beneath it, as if catching colours that weren't really there. Its paws were webbed, yet ended in short, curved claws, and its eyes wide, round, and the colour of moonlight followed his every movement. He crouched beside it. "Easy now," he whispered, reaching out. The creature blinked once and made a low humming sound deep in its throat. When he lifted it, it didn't struggle. It only pressed close against his chest, trembling. His father, working nearby, looked over. "That thing's not for keeping," he said, then went back to his nets. Pascal didn't answer. That evening he made a bed for it in a basket beside the hearth. He called it Rua, though its fur was black as peat. It slept curled tight, tail wrapped around its nose, and every now and then it made a low hum again, the sound of a kettle far away. Days passed and the bond between creature and boy grew. Pascal brought it small fish from the traps and showed it how to roll stones with its paws. When he laughed, it would raise its head and make a sound that almost echoed him. At night, it followed him to bed and slept at his feet. Within weeks, it had grown beyond a pup, the body lengthened, muscles moving smooth beneath the skin, and small ridges began to form along its spine like the hint of fins. Its eyes grew paler, silvery white, as if reflecting the lake even indoors. When it breathed, its ribs pulsed in two rhythms, one quick and one deep. But it was gentle, always gentle, and when Pascal scratched behind its ears, it leaned into him and made that humming sound that vibrated up his arm. His mother smiled at the sight. Even his father, though he said nothing, didn't chase it off. Through the short days of winter, they were inseparable. Pascal taught it to fetch sticks, though it would never bring them back. It preferred to chew them to splinters. He brushed its coat with an old comb, marvelling at the sheen of the fur, how it stayed dry even after it rolled in snow. Sometimes, when they walked near the lake, it would stop and stare across the water for long minutes, perfectly still, nostrils flaring. Pascal only smiled and threw a stick, and the creature bounded after it. Then came that still, breathless winter afternoon. The sky was flat grey, the air was so cold it made the reeds ring when the wind touched them. Pascal went to the lake as he always did, and Rua followed, moving with an easy, powerful grace that no longer seemed clumsy or young. When they reached the shore, Pascal knelt beside it. "You like it today?" he said. "It's nearly warm." He laughed at his own joke. "It's the middle of winter. We'll freeze." But when his hand met Rua's side, heat spread through his fingers, rising up his arm until he was flushed from the chest out. The creature leaned close, eyes bright, tail sweeping the frost. Then it slid into the water with a single smooth motion. Pascal hesitated only for a second before following. The cold struck him like a slap, but the moment his hand touched Rua's back, the warmth returned, alive and moving. The two of them glided out across the surface, the water parting in wide, gentle rings. He laughed, clinging to the creature's neck as it swam faster, each powerful stroke pulling them farther from the reeds. The world was silent but for the sound of the strokes, the rhythm of his breathing, the steady warmth beneath his palms. Then, as if the lake itself had exhaled, a mist began to rise, soft at first, then thick, drifting low over the water. The shore vanished. Pascal's laughter died into breathless awe. Rua stopped, head breaking the surface, eyes fixed on him. The warmth faltered. Pascal shivered. "Let's go back," he said quietly. The creature didn't move. It simply watched him. Something had changed. Its eyes no longer seemed bright, but deep, endless, shifting with strange colors. The hum that used to soothe him was gone. In its place came a slow, heavy sound like a heartbeat echoing through the water. Then Rua lunged forward suddenly, playful, bumping him beneath the ribs. Pascal gasped, splashing. "Stop it," he said, laughing, trying to steady himself. Another nudge. Harder. Then a pull at his sleeve. He tried to grab hold of its fur again, but his fingers slipped. The warmth vanished completely. The cold struck back in an instant, biting through skin and bone. He cried out, reaching for it. But Rua had gone beneath the water, leaving only ripples and mist. A silence fell. Pascal's leg was tugged from below, sharp, insistent. Pascal jerked once, then again. His mouth opened in shock, eyes wide as he vanished beneath the fog. The lake stilled. By nightfall, only his coat was found on the stones. No creature, no sign of struggle, just a single line of bubbles trapped in the ice that formed overnight. His father spoke in silence to himself of the dour coo, the water hound, neither dog nor otter, but both born of the lake, warm to the touch and cold in the soul. They say it never means to harm until the water calls it home. Jerry Plunket never spoke this aloud at first, but eventually it got to him. He began to speak of it openly, more regularly. The ones who believed walked on. The ones who didn't laughed. Jerry hated the idea of people laughing at his son's disappearance. The dark thoughts their laughter gave him never went away. The corridor sounded asleep until the hinges screamed. Two orderlies came along with a man between them, his bare feet sliding on the wet flags. He laughed to himself, high and breathless, like someone remembering a joke too late. One of them cuffed him, and he laughed again, the sound going crooked. "Indecent, is it?" the first said. "Proud as a stallion in that laundry. You'll keep it to yourself now." "Let him be," the second muttered. He's learned nothing from the last hiding. They reached the end cell and flung him inside. The clang went on, rattling, the door riding the lamps. He lay where he fell, shoulders shaking. A black eye had gone to shadow, swelling one half of his face. He hummed, 2 notes up, 2 notes down, a tune without a tune. In the next cell, a man sat straight on a cot with his hands on his lap. A loop of thin fishing line hung from his fingers like a rosary made for work instead of prayer. He didn't look over when the laughter started. He stared at his boots and blinked, hardly that. On his cell door, the tin plate read, J. Plunket. A guard passed and paused. You've a visitor, Plunket. Try not to scare her off. I don't scare, Jerry said. You did in Glenamaddy? Keys clacked, boots went away, silence settled except for the low humming from the end cell. The nun came in then, small against the wash of light behind her, lantern in one hand, a little notebook and a pencil in the other. She looked older than she had the winter before. There was a weight under her eyes, a tiredness to the way she held her mouth, as if the words themselves had grown heavy. She stepped into Jerry's cell and set the lantern on the floor between them. The walls were lime-washed and damp. A dented tin basin on a stool beside the cot, half filled with water in the colour of weak tea. It trembled whenever someone moved in the corridor, making a low chime against the metal. The nun sat on the wooden stool they'd left for her and folded open the notebook. The pencil lay across the spine. You know why I'm here? She said softly. Aye, Jerry said. Read it anyway. She found the page marked with thread. Her thumb paused on the first line. When she began, her voice was calm enough to pass for breathing. Jeremiah Plunket, fisherman, wife deceased, one son, Pascal, lost to drowning on Lough. She glanced up. On the lake. Jerry's hands closed around the loop of line. He nodded once. She read on. After the boy's disappearance, you made inquiries house to house. You put up notices yourself when the parish clerk delayed, lamps smoking after midnight pasted on your cuffs. You told people a creature had taken him. Some pitied you, some didn't. They laughed, Jerry said. Just say it. Some laughed, she said. In the lane, in the public houses, a few to your face. He swallowed, the lamp hissed. In the spring, the nun went on, you began carrying your hooks outside of work. You kept them oiled. You knotted line while you walked. You slept with the boots on. People crossed the road rather than meet your eye. Jerry's laugh was a breath with no voice to it. They crossed the road, he said, but they didn't cross their mouths. The nun turned the page. Her pencil tapped once on the paper and stilled. On Whitsun Eve, she said, you left your cottage at dusk. You went along the old road past the chapel and the toll house and the 5 ash trees. You let yourself in at Kelly's with the bar you'd hidden under the ditch. You dragged the hooks along the walls as you moved so that the sleepers woke. The first cry brought the second house out, Tierney's, and you were already there. You found them in their beds. You pulled 2 of them from the room and the hooks caught cloth and flesh together. You left marks on the doorposts, on the stair rail. At Murphy's, the kitchen was still warm, pot on the hob, bread cooling. and you threw the table to clear your way. You tipped a cradle. The guards found it split along the seam. Jerry's head bowed. The loop of line tightened around his knuckles. He said nothing. You went house to house, the nun said, her voice flat as paper. People woke under you and tried to run, and you used the line to bring them down. Your hooks tore into their skin and their faces and their hearts. Blood smeared like fish oil along the hall stones. At O'Hara's, a woman locked herself in the pantry. You pulled open the door, the latch tore out. You struck her once and she fell, and you left her there and went on to the lane. Jerry's breath roughened in his chest. The nun kept reading. At Murphy's, you spoke the boy's name. At Tierney's, you spoke it again. At Flynn's, you were heard to say, stop laughing, stop it now. There were 9 houses in all, 12 dead by morning. 3 more lingered and went before night. You carried the hooks home, cleaned them of the blood, and set them in their places. You washed your hands and put the bar back under the ditch. She closed the book. The pencil lay still. Jerry looked at the floor between his boots and spoke as if to the stone. They made a mouth of his name, he said. They chewed it and spat. He stopped. His jaw worked. I only wanted the noise to end. From the next cell came a chuckle that didn't belong to either of them. A coin clicked against the iron. Click, pause, click. The nun turned her head. Through the bars she saw only hands. One turned a coin over and over between its fingers, the motion neat and practiced. The other arm ended at the elbow, sewn and puckered under a strip of linen. Behind the bars, only a black shape, shoulders, the tilt of a head, nothing more. The tin plate on his cell read, W. Hessian. Evening, the voice said, low and easy. You did right by the boy, Plunket. Laughter's a sin no one confesses. The nun's breath caught. Her mouth formed the name before she meant it to. Mr. Hessian. Aye, he said. The coin clicked again. You remember, you're still handing out coins, are you? Still saving souls with coppers? Be silent, the nun said. I'm in the silent business, he said cheerfully. I make people quiet as fields in snow. The coin flashed and vanished in shadow, came back again. Click, pause, click. Behind Jerry's shoulder, the dented basin trembled in the lamplight. The nun looked at it without meaning to, the way tired eyes look for something to settle on. The water's surface shivered, turned a smeary mirror. She saw Jerry's back as a pale shape in the curve, and saw, moving across it, something pink and small like a cherub carved badly. Bald head, round cheeks, a wide, patient smile. It lay along his shoulder like a baby, clinging. She shut her eyes. When she opened them, it was still there in the reflection. Then she lowered her gaze further, and the basin showed her own bent shape, and a second little creature on her back, grinning up from the curve of the metal. You see yours? Hessian asked softly, as if he knew her eyes had gone. They follow where they're fed. Yours looks fat, sister. She pressed her fingers to the cross at her collarbone and tried to pray. The words came wrong, half remembered, as if they'd slipped to the far side of the wall. Jerry spoke again, voice steady and far. I told the boy the thing wasn't for keeping, he said. I told him Then I watched him feed it and laugh with it, and I let it be. That's on me. I see him in the water now. I hear hooks scrape timber when I close my eyes. There's no sleep that's not a net. Do you regret it? The nun asked. Regret is just hunger with nowhere to feed, he said. Hessian laughed softly, approving as a schoolmaster might approve a neat sum. The laugh changed at the end into something else, a wet snort, quick and short like a horse clearing its nose. He stopped laughing. What was that? He said, not quite as easy as before. No one answered him. Water plinked from the basin lip to the floor, slow and regular. Somewhere far in the building a door slammed, and the slam rolled away down the stone like a wave. The nun turned her eyes from the basin to the bars. She could see only Hessian's hands. The coin flicked, vanished, reappeared. The stitched stump rested on the iron and twitched now and then. Behind those bars, only silhouette, shoulders, the tilt of a head angled toward them. On that dark shoulder, for a moment, the blacker outline of something perched as still as a crow in evening. What about you, sister? Hessian said, bright again. Have you no demons? She looked at him, or at the space where his face would be, and said nothing. Her throat worked once. She turned a page of the notebook just to make a sound that wasn't the coin. You write me down too? He asked. Put me in that little book with the good man who loved his son and the bad folk who laughed. You're in here for indecency, the nun said, grasping at the thing the orderlies had said aloud. You've been warned before. Ah, he said gently. Is that the story you'd like? The coin clicked twice, quick as a wink. Write this one instead. I kept company with a horse that wasn't a horse. Out west, they call it the Fioch Dubh, the dark stag, the thing that wears hooves like a Sunday suit, hat brim low, teeth like needles when it grins, trod along behind me one night on a road that had no business being that long. I stole from men, it steals from God. There's a difference. The nun felt the basin tremble on the stool. She didn't look. The reflection had started to live in her head. Even with her eyes on the floor, she could feel the pink weight on her shoulder like a child that had gone to sleep and would not be put down. You should be at peace, she said, because it was the only sentence left in her. Peace is for the honest, Hessian said kindly. We are not that, any of us. Jerry rubbed his tongue along the line and left a thin burn on his skin. I'm not honest, he said. When I found it by the reeds, I told him that thing wasn't for keeping. I saw the way it looked at him, and I said it again. Then I saw him laugh, and I said nothing more. That's the truth. He lifted his eyes to the nuns at last. They were dull and red-rimmed and empty of surprise. You can write that down if you like. Put it under my name, not the hooks. Put the letting be. She didn't write. The pencil made a soft noise against the paper and left no mark. Tell me the rest, she said, and she kept her voice even by force. Tell me how you chose the houses. I didn't choose, he said. I walked. Whatever door came under my hand, I opened. If there were men in it, I left them for last. I didn't mean that to be a kindness. It only happened that way. At Murphy's, there was a cradle by the hearth. I tipped the table and it split the cradle, and I heard the wood crack. And flesh hitting floor. I didn't look down. Say their names, the nun said softly. He shut his eyes, and the names came out of him like stones, from the heaviest to the small ones that gather at the end. He said them all. The nun repeated each under her breath, and the pencil scratched at last, a thin sound like a mouse behind a wall. "Enough," Hessian said, as if he were bored. "He knows what he did, the sister knows. God does or doesn't. There's the world." "And what are you here for?" Jerry asked him without looking. "For being seen," Hessian said, cheerful again. "For laughing at the wrong time, for making the wrong men feel small, for telling a truth nobody asked for." "What truth?" the nun said. "That the dark wear shoes," he said, "and that we polish them for it." The basin's water steadied, the little ripple went flat. The nun looked once, quickly. In that warped mirror she saw 3 shapes: Jerry's back with the pink thing clinging, her own with another, and the black suggestion of a third on the shoulder in the next cell, perfectly still, perfectly patient, as if it had all the time in the world and nothing at all to do with it. "Write this, sister," Hessian said softly. "No one leaves clean." She shut the notebook. Jerry stared at the floor. The loop of line lay motionless over his knuckles, now slack and harmless, a prayer that had forgotten its words. He breathed in. He breathed out. In the basin, something tiny and brown drifted up from the bottom and down again, an insect that had come in on someone's sleeve, now lost in the little round lake of other people's water. The nun stood. Her knees shook once and steadied. She picked up the lantern, and the light made their shadows long across the wall. She looked at the plate on the door, J. Plunket, as if the letters themselves might tell her what to do next. She stepped into the corridor. For a second she let herself look at the next door, W. Hessian, and at the hands on the bars, the clever fingers flipping the coin, the stumps resting lightly as if it had never mattered. "You'll come again?" Hessian asked, mild as milk. "I'll come," she said. "Well, bring 2 coins next time," he said. "One for the beggar and one for the beast." He flicked the coin and caught it. The faintest breath moved in the corridor, a cold gust settling from nowhere like a sigh passing a doorway. It made the lantern tremble and the basin shiver and the tin plates tinkle so softly you might have thought you'd imagined it. The nun turned away. Her steps went down the hall, straight as a line of writing, and faded. The orderlies' voices came back in a minute, ordinary as rain. They spoke about bread and tobacco and whose turn it was to clean the stair. The corridor took the words and swallowed them. In Jerry Plunkett's cell, the loop of line slid from his hand and fell to the floor with a sound no one heard. In the next cell, the coin clinked once more, and Hessian's laugh came small and pleased, as if he had taught a trick to a clever dog who'd nearly learned it. The basin's water steadied into a perfect trembling circle, holding 3 little broken reflections that waited without hurry for the light to go out. In the morning, please like, subscribe, and tell me what kind of fairies you'd like to hear about next. Come back every night. Until then, good night.